hands at his feet.
Welcome to the teaching ministry of Calvary Chapel Corinth with Senior Pastor Charlie Villard. We're an expositional teaching church with a mission to comfort those in any affliction with the comfort in which we ourselves have been comforted by God. We're glad to have you join us today, so let's open up our Bibles and begin our verse-by-verse study in God's Word. Genesis chapter 4. We left off last week with the Cain and the murder of his brother, and I stopped just shy of the family of Cain at the end of verse 15. So let's go back. Let's finish the chapter. Let's go back just a little bit, and then we'll finish the chapter. And then my intention, hopefully, is to go into chapter 5. To look at the lineage of Adam. If I can zip through that, we may start on the wickedness that ensued after Adam and brought about the flood. So Genesis chapter 4. Let's go to verse 9. So after the murder of Cain, verse 8. Sorry. Now Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and killed him. And the Lord said to Cain, "Where is Abel your brother?" He said, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" And he said, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. So now you are cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you till the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. A fugitive and a vagabond you shall be on the earth." So God's judgment on Cain is that Cain would be banished, that he wouldn't... it would be worse than his father Adam. He would till the ground to get nothing from it. He would be a fugitive on the run for his life and a vagabond. And Cain, instead of, we talked about it last time, right? Instead of going, "Oh, hey, I'm so sorry, I did this. What can I do to fix this?" Cain just hears his punishment and thinks about himself. It says, "And Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Surely you have driven me out from this day from the face of the ground. I shall be hidden from your face. I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond on the earth. And it will happen that anyone who finds me will kill me." Only concern for himself here, right? It's the wrong answer. And the Lord said to him, "Therefore, whoever kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold." It's important to remember that piece, which is why I went back a little. "And the Lord set a mark on Cain, lest anyone find him should kill him." We don't really know what this looked like, right? If it's a visible mark that was a warning to everyone else, if it's an invisible mark, just a sort of a surrounding, a shield, really, that no one would kill Cain, that he would live out his life knowing all that he had done. He would not escape this life. Continuing on in verse 16, it says, "And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden." So Cain's now ventured out. He's out on his own. And it says, "And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. And he built a city, and he called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch." So the population, there's no time given between the time he went out from the Lord and when it says he knew his wife and he built a city. But a city would mean what, right? When we think about Maine, we're in Charleston, right? It's a little town. There's minimal services, and a town office that we're in, right, is run by a few people. A city is something much greater, right? It has, city utilities and probably public running water. Wouldn't have at that point, right? But we think about our time, a city government, a city board, schools. A city becomes this populated area, and it says that Cain had built this city. So clearly, that the time that has passed is significant enough that the earth's now being greatly populated. We don't have a time between what it is in there, but it says that Cain knew his wife. Now, the only way to know who his wife was is there was only two people populating the earth at the time that Cain was born, which was Adam and Eve. So he married his sister. Now, people normally look at this and go, "Ew, gross, you can't do that, that's wrong." And yes, it is. And then later, when God gives the law, he would outlaw that and say you can no longer do that. His reasoning behind that as well was there was enough people populating the earth, we didn't need to do that. And secondarily, The bloodline had been tainted so badly by sin that it started making, abominations ultimately, right? Things that are born make too much corruption in the blood, and too close of relatives makes inbreeding possible. And that's, it kind of gets ugly. But at this point, we're only one generation out of the garden, right? Cain and his sister would have been fairly pure blood, minus the sin that's already in him. So we see him knowing his wife, and we talked about last time the Old Testament version of knew, the word yada, is a sexual thing. So he knew his wife. They had sex, she conceived and bore Enoch. So he had a son. And he built a city, and he called the city after the name of his son Enoch. And to Enoch was born Irad, and Irad begot this one's going to be a tough one. It's Mahuyael begot Methusael. Methusael begot Lamech. Then Lamech took for himself 2 wives. So law of first mentions, right? We had the first city, now we have the first polygamist. Took for himself 2 wives. So like 3 generations now. What do we got? No, maybe 4? Enoch. 6 generations, and we already have a guy who's taken 2 wives. Why he would want 2 wives, no idea. Well, from a man's perspective, it's double the sex, I suppose, but it's also double the amount of work that he has, double the amount of communication that he has to have with his wives. But they're populating the earth and being fruitful. Lamech, for whatever reason, decided to do this. One of the names of his wife was Ada, and the other's name of the second was Zilha. And Ada bore Jabal, and his father, he was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. So Jabal became a shepherd, a herdsman, right? And it's mentioned here, so it's worth talking about. It's a good career. He lives in tents. He would have been living in the wilderness, living with his livestock, taking care of them, likely, selling them off, probably, eating them, feeding his families. But they became herdsmen. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all those who play the harp and the flute. So we have musicians, right? There's decent careers for these men, right? A herdsman, a musician. And it says, and as for Zilha, she also bore Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every craftsman in bronze and iron. And the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. So we've gotten, jobs now running. Herdsmen, instruments, musicianship, and then we have these craftsmen that are good in bronze and iron, which makes sense, right? Instruments as well would have been guitars. They would have probably fashioned other things out of metals. So in this city now we have this sort of picture of a bustling city, right? It has the careers in there. People might come and visit them. It says, then Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. Wives of Lamech, listen to my speech. For I have killed a man for wounding me, even a young man for hurting me. If Cain shall be avenged 7-fold, then Lamech 77-fold. I have no idea why this is here, in the sense of, how would he tell his wives this, right? But Lamech is now boasting that he's killed someone, and a young person at that, because this young person somehow wounded him. We don't know if it's an emotional wound, a physical wound, but obviously, the story of Cain has still passed through 5 or 6 generations, right? Would have been the great-great-great-grandfather. Let's see. So we have Cain, Enoch 1, Methusael 3, Lamech 4. So 3 or 4 generations, a great-great-great-grandfather. I mean, how many? I was thinking about it. I don't really know much about my great-great-great-grandparents at all. I don't even think I know their names. But what's passed along here, though, to Lamech is his father, his great-great-great-great-grand, it's probably too many, right? His great-grandfather, times however many generations. The story that if Cain was avenged, Cain was killed, then God would avenge 7-fold. So he knows his story, and he says, I don't know if it's some sort of pride and arrogance that he's like, well, I'm going to do the same thing God did, only I'm going to make it worse. He says, if Cain shall be avenged 7-fold, then Lamech 77-fold. What's interesting is we have no idea what happened to him because he is never mentioned again in Scripture. No one cared. So he came out with this great boastful thing with his wives and then became at least nothing. because he's never mentioned again after this. In verse 25, and Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son, and named him Seth. For God has appointed another seed for me instead of Abel, whom Cain killed. So we talked a little bit about it last week, but Eve coming out of the garden in the fall, right? She knew, that she would be the seed of the Savior, the Messiah would come from her. But no indication was given to her as of when. So she had Cain, there was hope in him that he'd be the one, and then Abel, maybe he'll be the one. She's going to spend her whole life having children, hundreds of years, right? I mean, the population that's come out of her, I mean, you think about, you could have a kid every 10-ish months, right, or 11 months. So we'll just say once a year. Maybe for 80 or 90 years, she has, 800, what was it? Adam lived, we're going to come on to that in a second, but Adam lived 930 years. We'll say she lived somewhere close to that, 900 years. That's a lot of kids you could be having for that amount of time. So that's a long time to be hoping for a Savior too, right? Is this the one? Is this the one? Is this the one? What she doesn't know is Seth, the Lord will come out of the line of Seth. But it says, and as for Seth, to him also a son was born and named him Enosh. And the men began to call on the name of the Lord. So we've had Cain in his lineage, and then Lamech taking multiple wives, and who knows from there the lineage that went on out, because it ended. My guess is it would still have ended in sin, and it would have continued on. Cain killed his brother, ruining all of that. Abel might have been, the one, maybe, that would have had this happen, but instead it was Seth. Seth, his son, they called upon the Lord, meaning at some point they knew, based on the history, that they should follow the Lord. They should call on his name, Yahweh. Right? So Adam clearly still filling in the gaps in knowledge, right? He's sharing who God is. And maybe Adam, for all these hundreds and hundreds of years, is still fellowshipping with God. Maybe he brings his son, and his son says, you know what, I'm going to serve him. The men began to call on the name of the Lord. In chapter 5, it says, this is the book of the genealogy of Adam. In the day that God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. He created them male and female and blessed them and called them mankind in the day they were created. And Adam lived 130 years and begot his son in his own likeness, after his image, and named him Seth. So remember, we talked a few weeks ago, I think it was, about we don't really know how long it was before they left the garden and then they had Cain. What we do know now, though, is there's 130 years between the garden and Seth, right? So we've gotten a little bit of a time frame. So he's 130 years old having a kid. And Adam, it's not really too bad for him. It really would be tougher for Eve. But again, remember, the bloodlines sin has only been a few generations. We see it today, some 6,000 years later. And Adam, 130 years old, begot a son in his own likeness after his image and named him Seth. After he begot Seth, the days of Adam were 800 years, and he had sons and daughters. So all the days of Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. So near 1,000 years this guy lived, right? Producing children, sons and daughters who became husbands and wives and populated the earth. It says Seth lived 105 years and begot Enosh. After he begot Enosh, Seth lived 807 years and had sons and daughters. So we already see it, right? 2 generations, and we've already lost some near 100 years off of a lifespan. Seth lived 105 years and begot Enosh. So all the days of Seth were 912 years, not 100. It's he's lost 30, 15 years, 18 years. Enosh lived 90 years and begot Canaan. And after he begot Canaan, Enosh lived 815 years. So now we've dropped 100 years-ish. years, and he had sons and daughters as well, right? So, hundreds and hundreds of, a couple of thousand years, really. The earth is well populated, so all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and he died. And Canaan lived 70 years and begot Mahalalel. After he begot Mahalalel, Canaan lived 840 years, and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Canaan were 910 years, and he died. Mahalalel lived 65 years, and he begot Jared. After he begot Jared, Mahalalel lived 830 years, and had the sons and daughters. So all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years, and he died. Jared lived 162 years and begot Enoch. And after he begot Enoch, Jared lived 800 years and had sons and daughters. So all of the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah. After he begot Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years. He had sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years, and Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Man, at best, I was thinking about this, most of us live 70 or 80 years. I'd say a majority of Christians probably, maybe as a kid you were taken to church, but it really never set in. You live life for 10 or 15 or 20 years maybe, and at best in your 30s you might come to the Lord and really truly live your life. Just a generalization. And then you spend, decade learning who God is and hopefully following faithfully, and then you're midway through your life-ish and you're headed downhill at that point because you're 50 or over. Not that that's terrible, but there's a certain point where we're going to pass over, right? And we're headed down the downhill slope. It was 40 years, right? So over the hill. So I'm 6 years over it at this point. I'm already headed back downhill. You guys, you're not even halfway there yet. Right? Hopefully, you spend your life seeking God, living for God. Because I can tell you, living for God, he slows your whole life down. I mean, sometimes it seems like it zips by, but at the same time, he doesn't. He works in seasons, and you spend long seasons in prayer waiting sometimes, and then you spend some seasons just it shoots by, and you're like, where have we been? But he has a way of restoring your life, right? It's in I can't remember the book, but he talks about that he will give back to you what all the locusts have eaten. It's one of the minor prophets. But he does that. He can renew our minds. He restores us. And even though we keep getting older, he says that we become more like children to him. Right? If we seek him, we realize our reliance upon him. So at best, we spend 40, 50 years maybe, right, walking with God. And hopefully, a good, strong 40 or 50 years. I hope I get 20 years of ministry, let alone, 50. But Enoch, he says he walked with God 300 years, a third of his life. Well, see, he went 365, so he spent 300 years. 65 shy, I suppose. 300 years walking with God, living a life of God. Imagine the things that God talked to him about. The walking, right? That's the one thing that stood out to me. And it's, as we read on, we're going to read on just a bunch of names and a bunch of lives, right? But they're people. They were lifetimes. They were generations. They had children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-great-grandchildren. But Enoch, he didn't die. It's the coolest thing. He just walked with God. Right? He let God take care of it all, and then eventually he was not. That was it. Right? God took him. He, in most cases, when you study Scripture, most scholars will say he'll be one of the two that comes back. He was one of the witnesses, right, that was standing on the mountain. Hopefully, that's how our life is, right? That we walk so closely with the Lord. Just one day, we're going to taste death. The Lord's not taking us out of here unless he comes back and returns, pulls us out of here by the rapture. We're all going to taste a physical death at some point. Methuselah lived 187 years and begot Lamech. After he begot Lamech, Methuselah lived 782 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Methuselah were 969, and he died. Lamech lived 182 years, had a son. He called his name Noah, saying, this one will comfort us concerning our work and the toil of our hands, because the ground which the Lord has cursed. Man, what a cool name. I mean, all these names, he never gives an explanation or description of them. We get to Noah. Called his name Noah, saying, this one will comfort us concerning our work and the toil of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord has cursed. I don't think Noah felt like he was blessed for a lot of years, right? Because people hated him. They made fun of him. We watched Noah back a couple of months ago. We saw how he was treated, right? God spoke to him and told him what to do, and he followed it faithfully. And because of that, when the Lord comes and he wipes out the world with the flood, Noah and his family have been saved. After he begot Noah, Lamech lived 590 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Lamech were 777 years. And he died. And Noah was 500 years old. And Noah begot Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Chapter 6. Now it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and the daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, and they were beautiful. And they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. So what's happening here? We're going to see this mix now, right? These angels that have fallen, that see the beauty that's in the daughters of men. And it's going to create this ugliness that was never meant to be. It says, and the Lord said, my spirit shall not strive with man forever. For he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants on the earth in those days and also afterwards. So what's happens now is we have this event where Satan's angels, demons, right, are now taking wives for women, human wives, and they're mixing with them, creating giants, which is what, if we go to the book of David, David's story, and we talk about the Philistines, that's what they were, right? They were giants. They were men that were the same kind of thing, right? They were larger than any man. But God puts out a message. He says, this is the first time he's spoken in his word, right, since chapter 3. Right? He had the conversation, he kicks them out of the garden, protects the garden, and we don't really hear his word, hear him speak much. He steps in at this point where everything is really on a decline. And it says when back in verse 1 of chapter 6, now when it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth. So now we have this rapid growth. God says, my spirit shall not strive with man forever. And eventually he's going to be done, right? He waits for us. He strives with us. He goes along, watches all of our sin and sees all that goes on the earth and is appalled by it, right? He's a holy, righteous God. He knows he's going to send his son at some point, right? We don't know at this point when it's going to be. That's up to God. We don't know when he's going to return. But he points out that he is indeed flesh, and he puts a limit now on how long these men can live. Because the longer we live, the more temptation can grow. The longer we've been around, the more we can wear down. Right? That's the importance of walking with God. We don't have a detailed account of Enoch's life. All we know is that he walked with God, right? And then God took him to be with him, and he has a use for him in the future. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were mighty men who were of old, men of renown. There's a lot of history here, and I won't really dig into it. Chuck Missler's, he's a cool teacher. It can be weird sometimes, right? And he has a lot of cool teachings on the Nephilim, which is what these were called. And what really, I thought about digging into that whole thing, and then I thought, you know what? It doesn't really matter. What matters is that what God does not strive with man forever. He will not allow things to continue on. And it's the same in our lives. Eventually, life is going to catch up with us. Sin is going to catch up with us. It's going to wear us down to the point where we'll have nothing left. Hopefully, unlike Cain, we will lay our lives down and say, Lord, do what you will with my life. Help me, save me. We will repent of it. These giants walking the world, they're an abomination. It says, then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Verse 5 is the exact opposite of what the world tells us today. Essentially, everyone's born good, right? And we do some good and we do some bad throughout our lives, but everyone's heart's is right in the right place, and it's a good thing. And we have trauma and brokenness, and people hurt us and we hurt people, and we go on with our lives, right? But we're essentially good. And at the end of our life, we'll hopefully outweigh the bad that's been done with good. Like that somehow fixes everything. God's clear. Even before the flood, what does he say? The wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Man, God's good creation is now filled with evil and has only evil thoughts. It's Jeremiah, who can, the heart is deceitfully wicked. I think it was Jeremiah. Deceitfully wicked above all else. It's sick. Who can save it? Who can fix it? We can't. Can't actually fix it, right? Like me and you can't do that. As hard as I tried to be good, I still did bad. Still found myself doing the things that the world would say, nah, it's wrong, right? Don't do those things. And what's worse is I found myself drawn to them, excusing how I lived my life so I could keep doing the things that I was drawn to. And that's the hardest part, right? That's the point of walking with God. If we walk with God, spend time with him every day, right? Talk to him continually, keep our eyes focused on him. There's a lot less time for us to be focused in this life on all the things of the world. And what's most persuasive? The things of the world, right? It's what we want. We want to be popular. We want to be an influencer. We want to be seen by people. We want to be cheered by people. We want to have a name that gets remembered. We want to be on the news. I mean, hopefully you want to be on the news for a good thing, but God made it clear. That's not my words, it's his word. He saw the wickedness of man, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth. He was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, from dust, right? From the face of the earth, from dust. Both man and beast, creeping thing, and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. Man, that's a weird, gross feeling to be sorry. I mean, when you think about it, like you're like, oh, I made a mistake, I'm really sorry. You feel this sort of sense of remorse. This is different. This is regret, right? God, creator of all things, saying like, what has happened? I regret doing this. You have to wipe everything. Everything's been tainted. The birds, the creeping things, human. And it says, but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. It's the first time we hear the word grace. A lot of people say it's, an acronym, God's riches at Christ's expense, grace. This bugs me, this grace thing too. God offers us two things, mercy and grace. Mercy is not getting what you deserve. Paige, you don't pick up your room and Frank's asked 5 times, and he says, yeah, now you're going to do the dishes for 2 weeks. And you're like, oh man, that's ridiculous. I'll go clean my room. And And then he's like, no, you're going to still do the dishes and you're going to clean your room. And you're like, oh man, that's not really fair. Can you show me mercy is what you're looking for. Don't give me that. Most people will go, oh no, give me grace. You got that jacked up. It's the reverse. You want mercy. You want something that you deserve. You didn't clean your room. You deserve it. You knew what it was coming. You're saying, please show me mercy and take away that. That's what Cain should have asked for, mercy. This is too great. I cannot bear this. Grace, on the opposite end, is getting something you don't deserve, right? So if you don't clean your room and you guys end up in a fight, right, and it's not done, and then you do, he says, okay, look, you know what, I'll show you mercy. Just go clean your room, take care of it now. You won't have to do the dishes for 2 weeks. And then you're done, and he comes out and he says, you know what, let's go out and let's get ice cream. And you're like, oh, I don't deserve that. I mean, I just argued with you. He's like, you know what, I love you. I want to show you grace. Giving something to you that you don't deserve, right? So that makes sense, right? The world's got those two screwed up. They use the word grace all the time because they're afraid of the word mercy. Because what does mercy indicate? I've done something wrong, and I have to admit to the fact that I've done something wrong. Grace, the cop that stopped me for speeding back a couple of months ago, right? He didn't show me grace. He showed me mercy. I was speeding. I deserved a speeding ticket. He took my stuff, went back to the car, did whatever he decided, came back to the car and he handed it back and said, slow down. If he had came back to the car with a bag of money and said, and by the way, here's $1 million for your trouble, right? That's grace. Mercy is letting me off from what I deserved. Grace is giving me something that I don't deserve. Noah didn't need mercy, right? Because he saw favor in God's eyes, but he was going to get mercy for the sins of everyone else, right? He, much like everyone else, would have went down in the flood. But it says here, he found grace in God's eyes. So God went, look, none of you are deserving of this. You're all going to get wiped out. But I'm actually going to give you something. I'm going to give you something out of this. I'm going to give you a chance at life. You're going to have to do something for me, right? And in verse 9, it says, this is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man. The mercy and grace thing makes sense, right? It drives me nuts when you see people on TV. Oh, please show me grace. No, that's not the right word. You're wrong. You broke the law. You need mercy, not grace. I'm not giving you $1 million. I'm just not going to give you what you deserve. People today don't like to say the word mercy. It makes me think of, the little guy that was here. I won't say his name because ultimately I'll go on Facebook. But he's like, want to play pinochle? I'm like, okay. Right? He put hands together, right? And he's like, he's twisting it, right? I'm not going to hurt him, right? But eventually he's like, it's not working. And you just squeeze a little bit. You twist and you go, oh, stop. Really, what you were supposed to yell is mercy, right? Mercy, mercy, mercy. No. Right? You're twisting it. You're going to break my hand, right? Show me mercy. Let me off from what I deserve. But Noah's going to get grace. This is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God. Noah begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The earth was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. So God looked upon the earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all the flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me. For the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. It's a cool way to put that, really. He doesn't say I'll destroy them. And we see later, hundreds of years later, in the story of Moses, right? When the Passover happens, he uses the angel of the Lord, right? To produce death amongst the firstborn of all of the Egyptians, the firstborn sons. So he can destroy anyone. He can cause death anytime. But he says, I'm going to destroy them with the earth. Might have been a crazy thing. So he's having these conversations with God, right? God is speaking to Noah. Noah has walked with him. He says, I will destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and outside with pitch. What's he going to do? He's going to make it waterproof. Right? I mean, the wood might be able to soak in some of the water, but you cover this thing with pitch. And it's, I don't know, you ever working in the woods, or Christmas tree for that matter, sometimes you get sap, right? And it gets all over everything. It's super sticky, but eventually if it's on your hand, it would become almost like a shell. You could like peel it off, right? Pick it off. Makes it waterproof. So he's going to make a waterproof boat. And this is how you shall make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. You shall make a window for the ark, and you shall finish it into a cubit from above. Set the door of the ark in its side. You shall make it with a lower section, lower, second, and third decks. And behold, I myself am bringing floodwaters to the earth to destroy under heaven all flesh in which is the breath of life. Everything that is on the earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall go into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And of every living thing of all the flesh, you shall bring 2 of every sort, kind, right, into the ark, 2 of every sort, to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female, of the birds after their kind, of the animals after their kind, of every creeping thing of the earth after its kind, 2 of every kind will come to you to keep them alive. And you shall take for yourself all the food that is eaten, and you shall gather it to yourself, and it shall be food for you and for them. Thus Noah did, according to all that God commanded him, so he did. You know, it's kind of neat here, like, I think it's impossible, right? Like, for him to build this ark with all these animals. And we look at it from our perspective today. He didn't take the poodles, right? Ken Ham says the lowest form of dog. That dog is never, ever going back to be a wolf, right? So far removed from a dog. If you guys have a poodle, please don't take it personally. I grew up with poodles. My grandparents had them, and I see them and I want to kick them. Like, just, these nice folks, never mind. I'll leave it at that. I like all dogs. I don't want to be mean to them. But he's not taking every version of a dog, right? There was wolves at this point, and maybe some lower form of a wolf, but there's not 875 different breeds of dogs that they're going to go into this ark, right? It's 2 of every kind, a male and a female of its kind, because once you have those things, what you have? The ability of life, right? The ability to reproduce. So you build an ark, take 2 of all these kinds. He's going to send them. They're going to come to Noah in this ship. And he says, plus you, your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives. So what do we got here? We got a similar situation to what's already happened. He's about to wipe the earth, and the earth is already populated, but it's full of evil and violence and strife. He says, this can't be. I'm done. I'm going to wipe this whole thing, and we're going to start all over again. It doesn't start in a less controversial way, unfortunately, but. So he's got his whole family, right? And that's it. He has no one else. He doesn't allow anyone else. And why? Because of the grace God gave Noah and his family. I mean, his son may not have been perfect, but he said, you and your family, you're going to be blessed by this. I'm going to establish my covenant with you. Cool word, right? We saw a covenant, a blood covenant, in Genesis chapter 3. First sacrifice, the first shedding of blood, and a promise that a son would come, right? Eventually. But God's going to make another covenant, a promise. Right? That's what marriage is all about, a covenant. That's what we do. We go together. We say it. We've watered it down so much. Just some words. We're just going to have a big thing, right? It's going to be a quick ceremony, real small. We're just going to get over that, and then we're going to have this giant, huge party. I mean, that's great to have a party. Obviously, the Lord attended weddings and parties. But what's the most important part of the wedding is not the party. It's the covenant. 2 people looking at each other, promising they're going to love each other for the rest of their lives. If anybody's going to get married, it's for you. Why are you walking away? He's like, I'm out of here. I hope she's listening. But that's the promise, right? The promise is that I've made a covenant that's unbreakable. When God makes a covenant, it's not to be broken. He's not intending to break it either. And of every living thing, flesh, you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark, the birds, the creeping things, your family, and then food, right? You're going to live there. He doesn't tell him how long. He gives him no other details, right? I mean, he's going to tell him how big to build the ship. And how to get the wood, right? Use gopher wood, covered in pitch. It's going to float. It's going to do its thing. But inside of that as well, you're going to have food for you and for the animals. We're not eating meat at this point yet. So they're still vegetarians. Right? And the animals are too. The animals aren't eating each other. They're not feeding bring 475 goats to feed the lions. Right? They're eating grass. Or at least maybe not at this point. Who knows? But humans are not eating meat. Yeah, we should probably end there. I don't want to go too long. I don't want to go up. We'll end it at 6. It says, thus Noah did, according to all that God commanded him, so he did. How do we apply that last line to our life? God calls us to do things. Paige, God calls you to listen to your parents. You clean your room. Got to clean your room. Calls your dad not to anger you, right? Not to do things intentionally to make you mad, but to teach you things, right? That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to teach our children things. Much like God teaches us, and then God expects us to do those things. So how do we have a good, long life? Staying clear of sin, doing what God asks of us, not having strife with man, right? We're going to come into situations because people are and they're broke, right? Their hearts are broke, and they're in need of Christ, but we walk with God, giving him those things, leaving with him that brokenness, allowing him to do stuff with it, spend our time walking with him, living peaceable among men as best as we can. We have a good, long life. We don't have to live a life of pain. Our parents wanted us to have a better life than them. I mean, maybe that's not true in all cases, right? There are certainly parents who are broken and messed up their kids. But you start off with a hope and a dream when you're going to have a kid, right? Going, I'll give them a better life. I hope they have a better life than I did. I hope they make better decisions than I did. And then as parents, we try to steer our kids in the right direction so they don't make the same mistakes that we did. But much like it said, the heart is evil and deceitfully wicked, and we do things that we want to do, and we find ourselves in trouble, not listening, and relationships broken, hoping at some point we come to the point where as early as possible we're introduced to Christ and we submit our lives to him and we follow him. And all the days we would have on this earth might be better, better than what they would be without Christ, because there is no good. No good on this earth. Now, people will say, well, I do good. Maybe so. Not in God's eyes. And his the standard that matters, right? His standard is to be perfect. Well, it's not possible. Of course it's not possible. That's why we have to have Christ. Right? That's why we have to live our lives for him. But if we do all that God commanded, what could go wrong? Right? How could that be bad? It's only bad because we want something that God says to stay away from.
Thank you for joining us today. We pray that this teaching has been a blessing to you. If you have any questions or would like to request prayer, you can visit us online at www.cccorinth.org. If you're local, come join us for a service at 125 School Road in Charleston, Maine. We want to remind you that the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God. Remain armored up, and until next time, grace and peace.